Applied Linguistics Group uploaded this video. This group is for helping students of BS, MS, MPhil, and PhD in English Linguistics, Applied Linguistics TEFL, TESOL, TOEFL and IELTS students. Dr. Khalid Malik is the founder of Applied Linguistics Group's youtube.com/@1966 Pakistani. Dr. Khalid Malik has a PhD in Applied Linguistics TESOL. He published more than 25 research papers. He taught a lot of foreign universities and admitted to a postdoctoral study project in Canada. Help others easily find Applied Linguistics Group by copying or downloading a QR code to join. The origin of language. What was the first language? How did language begin, where and when? Until recently, a sensible linguist would likely respond to such questions with a shrug and a sigh. As Bernard Campbell states flatly in Humankind Emerging, Allin and Bacon, 2005, we simply do not know, and never will, how or when language began. It's hard to imagine a cultural phenomenon that's more important than the development of language. And yet no human attribute offers less conclusive evidence regarding its origins. The mystery, says Christine Keneally in her book The First Word, lies in the nature of the spoken word. For all its power to wound and seduce, speech is our most ephemeral creation. It is little more than air. It exits the body as a series of puffs and dissipates quickly into the atmosphere. There are no verbs preserved in amber, no ossified nouns, and no prehistorical shrieks forever spread-eagled in the lava that took them by surprise. The absence of such evidence certainly hasn't discouraged speculation about the origins of language. Over the centuries, many theories have been put forward, and just about all of them have been challenged, discounted, and often ridiculed. Each theory accounts for only a small part of what we know about language. Here, identified by their disparaging nicknames, are 5 of the oldest and most common theories of how language began. The Bow Wow Theory. According to this theory, language began when our ancestors started imitating the natural sounds around them. The first speech was onomatopoeic, marked by echoic words such as moo, meow, splash, cuckoo, and bang. What's wrong with this theory? Relatively few words are onomatopoeic, and these words vary from one language to another. For instance, a dog's bark is heard as or in Brazil, ham ham in Albania, and wang, wang in China. In addition, many onomatopoeic words are of recent origin, and not all are derived from natural sounds. The ding-dong theory. This theory, favored by Plato and Pythagoras, maintains that speech arose in response to the essential qualities of objects in the environment. The original sounds people made were supposedly in harmony with the world around them. What's wrong with this theory? Apart from some rare instances of sound symbolism, there is no persuasive evidence, in any language, of an innate connection between sound and meaning. The La-La theory. The Danish linguist Otto Jespersen suggested that language may have developed from sounds associated with love, play, and, especially, song. What's wrong with this theory? As David Crystal notes in How Language Works, Penguin, 2005, this theory still fails to account for the gap between the emotional and the rational aspects of speech expression. The poo-poo theory. This theory holds that speech began with interjections, spontaneous cries of pain, ouch, surprise, oh, and other emotions, yabada-ba-doo. What's wrong with this theory? No language contains very many interjections, and, Crystal points out, the clicks, intakes of breath, and other noises which are used in this way bear little relationship to the vowels and consonants found in phonology. The yo-he-ho theory. According to this theory, language evolved from the grunts, groans, and snorts evoked by heavy physical labor. What's wrong with this theory? Though this notion may account for some of the rhythmic features of the language, it doesn't go very far in explaining where words come from. As Peter Farb says in Wordplay, what happens when people talk, vintage, 1993. All these speculations have serious flaws, and none can withstand the close scrutiny of present knowledge about the structure of language and about the evolution of our species. But does this mean that all questions about the origin of language are unanswerable? Not necessarily. Over the past 20 years, scholars from such diverse fields as genetics, anthropology, and cognitive science have been engaged, as Keneally says, in a cross-discipline, multidimensional treasure hunt to find out how language began. It is, she says, the hardest problem in science today. As William James remarked, language is the most imperfect and expensive means yet discovered for communicating thought. The origins of language. It is an intriguing question, to which we may never have a complete answer. How did we get from animal vocalization, barks, howls, calls, to human language? Animals often make use of signs, which point to what they represent, but they don't use symbols, which are arbitrary and conventional. Examples of signs include sniffles as a sign of an oncoming cold, clouds as a sign of rain, or a scent as a sign of territory. Symbols include things like the words we use. Dog, hunt, chian, cane, pero. These are symbols that refer to the creature so named, yet each one contains nothing in it that in any way indicates that creature. In addition, language is a system of symbols, with several levels of organization, at least phonetics, the sounds, syntax, the grammar, and semantics, the meanings. So when did language begin? At the very beginnings of the genus Homo, perhaps 4 or 5 million years ago. Before that, or with the advent of modern man, Cro-Magnon, some 125,000 years ago. Did the Neanderthal speak? We don't know. There are many theories about the origins of language. Many of these have traditional amusing names, invented by Max Muller and George Romans a century ago, and I will create a couple more where needed. 1. The Mama theory. Language began with the easiest syllables attached to the most significant objects. 2. The Tatar theory. Sir Richard Paget, influenced by Darwin, believed that body movement preceded language. Language began as an unconscious vocal imitation of these movements, like the way a child's mouth will move when they use scissors, or my tongue sticks out when I try to play the guitar. This evolved into the popular idea that language may have derived from gestures. 3. The Bow Wow theory. Language began as imitations of natural sounds: moo, choo-choo, crash, clang, buzz, bang, meow. This is more technically referred to as onomatopoeia or echoism. 4. The poo-poo theory. Language began with interjections, instinctive emotive cries such as oh, for surprise, and ouch, for pain. 5. The ding-dong theory. Some people, including the famous linguist Max Muller, have pointed out that there is a rather mysterious correspondence between sounds and meanings. Small, sharp, high things tend to have words with high front vowels in many languages, while big, round, low things tend to have round back vowels. Compare itsy bitsy teeny weeny with moon, for example. This is often referred to as sound symbolism. 6. The yo-he-ho theory. Language began as rhythmic chants, perhaps ultimately from the grunts of heavy work, heave-ho. The linguist R.S. Diamond suggests that these were perhaps calls for assistance or cooperation accompanied by appropriate gestures. This may relate yo-he-ho to the ding-dong theory, as in such words as cut, break, crush, strike. 7. The sing-song theory. Danish linguist Jespersen suggested that language comes out of play, laughter, cooing, courtship, emotional mutterings and the like. He even suggests that, contrary to other theories, perhaps some of our first words were actually long and musical, rather than the short grunts many assume we started with. 8. The hey you theory. A linguist by the name of Reves suggested that we have always needed interpersonal contact, and that language began as sounds to signal both identity, here I am, and belonging, I'm with you. We may also cry out in fear, anger, or hurt, help me. This is more commonly called the contact theory. 9. The hocus pocus theory. My own contribution to these is the idea that language may have had some roots in a sort of magical or religious aspect of our ancestors' lives. Perhaps we began by calling out to game animals with magical sounds, which became their names. 10. The Eureka theory. And finally, perhaps language was consciously invented. Perhaps some ancestor had the idea of assigning arbitrary sounds to mean certain things. Clearly, once the idea was had, it would catch on like wildfire. Another issue is how often language came into being, or was invented. Perhaps it was invented once, by our earliest ancestors, perhaps the first who had whatever genetic and physiological properties needed to make complex sounds and organize them into strings. This is called monogenesis. Or perhaps it was invented many times, polygenesis, by many people. We can try to reconstruct earlier forms of language, but we can only go so far before cycles of change obliterate any possibility of reconstruction. Many say we can only go back perhaps 10,000 years before the trail goes cold. So perhaps we will simply never know. Water babies. It may help us understand the origins of languages if we take a look at what is sometimes called the Hardy-Morgan hypothesis. For the originator of the hypothesis, Alistair Hardy, an English marine biologist, and Elaine Morgan, a Welsh writer and journalist. It is more commonly known as the aquatic ape theory. Humans have quite a few characteristics we don't share with our primate relatives. We don't have much body hair, we have a layer of fat under our skin, we have a descended larynx, we produce tears, we sweat a lot, we tend to have sex face to fact, we can hold our breath quite easily, we are able to swim even before we walk, and most importantly, we walk on our two legs just about all the time. Hardy, in the 1960s, suggested that perhaps he was cautious, and waited 30 years to tell anyone about his idea. We, or at least our genus, Homo, must have spent some portion of our existence on this planet in the water, wading, swimming, even diving. This may have been why we learned to stand up straight, while wading, supported by water, then evolving the strength and coordination to do so without the support, and only then proceeding into the savanna. There are other animals that have some of our odd characteristics. Sea mammals like whales and dolphins have little hair, hold their breath, and have extra fat under their skin. Others, like otters, have a lot of hair, but share the other abilities with us. The only other land animal that shares our lack of hair is the elephant, whose closest relatives include dugongs and manatees. Perhaps elephants, too, spent a portion of their evolution in the water. They do still breathe through their trunks when underwater. Gayeth et al. 1999. Perhaps our commonalities with these animals also extend to language. Musical babies. Darwin himself once said humans don't speak unless they are taught to do so, i.e. language is learned, and not innate in the way that the famous linguist Noam Chomsky and Steven Pinker, the author of The Language Instinct, say. Murray O'Vainichout and his students suggest that language comes from music, with some assistance from gestures and dance. Music is what is innate, not language. Like in many species of birds and mammals, singing, which uptight scientists prefer to call calls, in order to keep language as our special ability distinct, in order to call for help, keep track of each other, and, most especially, in order to attract mates. That use of sound is most definitely something that can evolve, from simple to the complex. Babies like music. They love listening to their mothers speak to them. The mothers like to use a sort of sing-song speech, mothers, which babies like even more. Babies begin to vocalize in very musical ways, and often hum or sing in short or long phrases, with modulations. Babies prefer major rather than minor intervals. And before they even learn individual words, they imitate the melody of speech, prosody. Even fetuses can remember sounds in the last trimester. Because our larynx is lower in the throat, our tongues are free to move around inside the mouth more, and our ability to hold our breath means we can control our exhaling and inhaling. We are born ready to make music and so speech. In fact, music and speech use the same areas of the brain, including Bruca's area. In regards to dancing, we see babies moving rhythmically while listening to music and even when not. We see the ease with which they can imitate the movements of others, perhaps by way of the famous mirror neurons. And regarding gestures, maybe you have noticed the connection between movements of the body, especially the hands, and movements of the mouth, especially the tongue. I still stick out my tongue when I try to play guitar, and I have seen children make grinding movements of their mouths when using the old school pencil sharpeners. A lot of the grammar that seems so essential when we look at written language, in speech is much more obvious. We use pauses, tone changes, melodies, rhythms, eye movements, facial expressions, and gestures that add information to our speech. Perhaps you, like myself, use the pauses we hear or imagine to guide our use of commas and periods. And perhaps you have noticed how much more difficult it is to understand someone when talking on the phone than when you are across the table from them. In addition to the hypothesis that we were once aquatic apes, Vaynerchuk adds that we were and still are very much musical apes. Applied Linguistics Group uploaded this video for helping students of BS, MS, MPhil, and PhD in English Linguistics, Applied Linguistics TEFL, TESOL, TOEFL and IELTS students. Dr. Khalid Malik is the founder of Applied Linguistics Group youtube.com/@1966 Pakistani. Dr. Khalid Malik has a PhD in Applied Linguistics TESOL. He published more than 25 research papers. He taught a lot of foreign universities and admitted to a postdoctoral study project in Canada. Help others easily find Applied Linguistics Group by copying or downloading a QR code to join.